The wind howled across the Montana prairie, a relentless force that bent the dry grass and carried the sharp scent of sagebrush. The horizon stretched endlessly, a canvas of gold and amber under a sky bruised with the threat of an approaching storm. In the heart of this rugged expanse, where the Little Bighorn River carved a shallow path through the earth, a faint rumble echoed, not thunder, but the labored breathing of a massive buffalo bull. Dr. Lena Crowfoot, a wildlife biologist with Blackfeet roots, paused her ATV at the edge of a shallow canyon. Her dark braid whipped in the wind as she scanned the landscape through binoculars. At 38, Lena had spent half her life studying the buffalo herds of the American West, her knowledge rooted in both science and the stories her grandfather told of Tatanka, the sacred buffalo. She'd been tracking a lone bull for days, a massive creature reported by local ranchers as behaving strangely, wandering far from its herd, lingering in this desolate stretch of prairie. Her radio crackled with static, the voice of her assistant, Mia, cutting through. "Lena, you see anything yet? Storm's closing in." Lena adjusted her binoculars, her breath catching as she spotted him. There, in the shadow of a low bluff, stood the buffalo. He was a colossus, nearly 6 feet at the shoulder, his 2,000-pound frame cloaked in a woolly chestnut coat matted with dust and streaked with blood. His curved horns gleamed faintly in the fading sunlight, and his dark eyes held a glint of something, resolve, perhaps, or pain. He stood motionless, his massive head lowered toward the ground, as if guarding something hidden in the tall grass. Lena's pulse quickened. This wasn't typical behavior. Buffalo were wary, quick to flee humans, yet this one stood its ground, even as she edged closer on foot. The crunch of dry grass under her boots seemed deafening in the stillness. The air was thick with the musky scent of the buffalo, mingled with the metallic tang of blood. As Lena approached, she saw the signs of distress: a deep gash along his flank, oozing red, and a slight limp in his left foreleg. Yet his stance was unwavering, his broad shoulders squared as if daring the world to approach. Lena crouched, her heart pounding. "What's got you so stubborn, big guy?" she whispered, her voice soft but steady. From the bluff, a local rancher named Tom Hargrove watched, his weathered face creased with concern. He'd called Lena after spotting the buffalo days earlier, noting its refusal to move even when his dogs barked nearby. "Never seen a buffalo act like that," he'd told her. "Like he's got a mission." Now, as he joined Lena, his boots scuffing the earth, he muttered, "He's hurt bad, Lena. Shouldn't he be running by now?" Lena didn't answer, her focus on the buffalo. His breathing was heavy, each exhale a visible puff in the cooling air. Then she heard it, a faint, high-pitched whimper from the grass beneath him. Her eyes widened. "Tom, did you hear that?" she asked, her voice sharp with urgency. He nodded, squinting toward the buffalo's hooves. Moving slowly, Lena circled to the side, keeping her distance to avoid spooking the animal. The buffalo's eyes tracked her, not with aggression but with a strange intensity, as if assessing her intent. She froze as another whimper came, clearer now, followed by a soft yip. "Puppies. Here." The thought was absurd. Coyotes or wolves didn't roam this close to the river, not with a buffalo nearby. But the sound was unmistakable. "Tom, get the tranq gun from the ATV, just in case," Lena said, her voice low but firm. Tom hesitated, then jogged back, his footsteps fading into the wind. Lena took a cautious step forward, her hands raised to show she meant no harm. The buffalo snorted, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the ground, but he didn't charge. Instead, he shifted slightly, revealing a shallow depression in the grass where 4 tiny shivering forms huddled together, newborn wolf pups, their eyes barely open, their fur damp and matted. Lena's breath caught in her throat. The pups were no more than a few days old, helpless and vulnerable. Above them, the buffalo stood like a sentinel, his massive body a shield against the wind and whatever else might come. Blood dripped from his gash, staining the grass, yet he remained rooted, his dark eyes flicking between Lena and the pups. She noticed fresh bite marks on his hindquarters, small, jagged, like those of jackals or coyotes. A chill ran through her. Had he fought off predators to protect these pups? "Easy, big fella," Lena murmured, her voice trembling with awe. She'd seen buffalo defend their own calves, but this? A buffalo guarding wolf pups? It defied everything she knew about animal behavior. Her mind raced with questions. Where was the mother? Why was the buffalo here, alone, risking his life for creatures not his own? Tom returned, trank gun in hand, his eyes wide as he saw the pups. "What in the hell?" he whispered. "Lena, what's going on here?" "I don't know," she admitted, her gaze locked on the buffalo. "But he's protecting them. Look at him, he's not moving, even with us here." The buffalo's ears flicked, and he let out a low, rumbling bellow, not threatening but almost pleading. Lena's chest tightened. The storm clouds were closer now, their edges tinged with lightning. The pups wouldn't survive the night without shelter, and the buffalo's injuries needed attention soon, or he'd collapse. Lena's radio crackled again. "Lena, you okay out there?" Mia's voice was tense. "Weather's turning fast." "We've got a situation," Lena replied, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. "I need the vet team out here now. And blankets, crates, anything for wolf pups. Hurry." She clicked off the radio, her eyes never leaving the buffalo. His head dipped lower, as if checking on the pups, and one of them let out a weak cry, barely audible over the wind. Tom shifted uneasily. "Lena, he's hurt bad. If he charges—" "He won't," she said, though her heart wasn't as certain. She took another step, her boots sinking into the soft earth. The buffalo's eyes met hers, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. There was a spark in those eyes. Not fear, not anger, but something deeper, a quiet intelligence that sent a shiver down her spine. It was as if he was asking for her help, trusting her to understand. Lena's mind flashed to her grandfather's stories, of buffalo as protectors, spirits of the prairie who carried the weight of the land itself. She'd always thought they were just tales, but now, staring into this buffalo's eyes, she wasn't so sure. "We're going to help you," she whispered, her voice catching. "And them." The wind picked up, carrying the distant howl of a coyote, or was it a jackal? Lena's pulse raced. The pups were in danger, and the buffalo's strength was fading. She needed to act fast, but how could she approach without spooking him? And what had driven this magnificent creature to risk everything for these tiny, unrelated lives? As the first drops of rain began to fall, Lena noticed a faint trail in the grass, leading away from the buffalo toward the canyon's edge. Scattered along it were more signs of a struggle, tufts of fur, claw marks in the dirt. Her eyes narrowed. Whatever had happened here, it was bigger than one wounded buffalo and 4 orphaned pups. The mystery was only beginning. The rain began to fall in earnest, a cold drizzle that stung Lena Crowfoot's face as she crouched near the wounded buffalo. The massive bull, whom she'd started calling Thunderheart in her mind, stood resolute over the 4 wolf pups, his chestnut coat slick with rain and blood. His breathing was a heavy, rhythmic rumble, each exhale sending mist into the air. The gash on his flank glistened, and the bite marks on his hindquarters, jagged and fresh, told a story of violence. Lena's heart pounded as another faint whimper rose from the pups, barely audible over the wind's howl and the distant crack of thunder. Tom Hargrove, the rancher, stood a few paces back, clutching the tranquilizer gun. His weathered face was tight with unease. "Lena, we gotta move fast," he said, his voice low. "Those pups won't last in this storm, and that buffalo's not looking good." "I know," Lena replied, her eyes fixed on Thunderheart. His dark gaze met hers, steady and unyielding, as if he understood the stakes. She'd never seen a buffalo act this way, standing guard over wolf pups, refusing to flee despite pain and human presence. It wasn't just instinct, there was purpose in his stance, a quiet intelligence that made her skin prickle. The radio crackled. "Lena, vet team's 10 minutes out," Mia's voice cut through. "Got crates, blankets, and a portable heater." "What's the situation?" 4 wolf pups, newborn, under a wounded buffalo, Lena said, keeping her voice calm despite the urgency. "He's protecting them, but he's hurt, bad. Possible coyote or jackal attack. We need to move carefully." "Wolf pups." Mia's voice rose in disbelief. "Under a buffalo? That's crazy, I know. Lena interrupted. Just get here. She clicked off the radio and turned to Tom. Help me check the area. There's a trail over there. She nodded toward the faint path in the grass, marked by scuffed dirt and tufts of fur, leading toward the canyon's edge. Tom hesitated, glancing at Thunderheart. You sure he won't charge? He trusts us, Lena said, though her stomach twisted with doubt. She edged closer, her boots squelching in the wet grass. Thunderheart's ears flicked, and he let out a soft, guttural sound. Not a threat, but a low vocalization, almost like a plea. One of the pups yipped, and he lowered his massive head, nudging the grass gently. Lena's breath caught. The pups were tiny, their gray fur plastered to their bodies, eyes barely slits. They squirmed weakly, pressing against each other for warmth. Lena's mind raced. Wolf pups this young needed their mother, but there was no sign of her, no tracks, no scent, no answering howls. The bite marks on Thunderheart suggested a fight, likely with coyotes or jackals, but why would a buffalo intervene? And how had the pups ended up here, in the middle of nowhere, under his protection? Tom, look at this, Lena called, crouching near the trail. The grass was trampled, and she spotted more claw marks in the dirt, smaller than a wolf's but sharper, like those of a jackal. A few yards away, a patch of blood-stained fur lay caught in a sagebrush, gray, like a wolf's, but too coarse for a pup. Lena's chest tightened. The mother might have been here, she said. Something attacked her, and Thunderheart stepped in. Tom joined her, squinting at the ground. Jackals don't usually take on wolves, do they? And a buffalo getting involved? That's unheard of. Lena nodded, her mind spinning. Buffalo were herd animals, fiercely protective of their own but indifferent to other species. Yet Thunderheart had fought off predators for these pups, risking his life. She traced the trail with her eyes, noting how it veered toward a cluster of rocks near the canyon's edge. We need to follow this, she said. There might be more clues. The rain intensified, drumming against her jacket. Thunderheart snorted, shifting his weight, and Lena glanced back. His eyes were on her again, intense and unwavering. One of the pups let out a plaintive cry, and he responded with another low bellow, his massive frame shielding them from the worst of the rain. Lena's throat tightened. Hold on, big guy, she whispered. We're not leaving them. As she and Tom followed the trail, the wind carried a faint, eerie howl. Coyotes, or perhaps jackals, lurking in the distance. The canyon's rocky walls loomed closer, their surfaces slick with rain. Lena spotted more signs of a struggle, a broken sagebrush, a smear of blood on a rock, and a single, adult-sized wolf paw print, half washed away. Her heart sank. The mother was likely dead or driven off, leaving the pups orphaned. But why had Thunderheart stayed? Lena, over here. Tom called, pointing to a shallow crevice between two boulders. Nestled inside was a tattered piece of fabric, blue, synthetic, like part of a jacket. Lena's pulse quickened. This isn't natural, she said, pulling on gloves to pick it up. The fabric was torn, stained with mud and what looked like blood. Someone was here, she murmured. Human. Tom's eyes widened. Poachers? Or hunters? Maybe, Lena said, her voice grim. She tucked the fabric into a plastic bag, her mind racing. Poaching had been a problem in the region, illegal hunters targeting wolves for pelts or buffalo for trophies. Had Thunderheart stumbled into a conflict between a wolf pack and humans? Or had the pup's mother been caught in a trap, leaving Thunderheart to protect her young? Headlights pierced the rain as the vet team's truck rumbled into view. Mia leapt out, followed by Dr. Sarah Klein, a veterinarian with years of experience treating wildlife. They carried crates, blankets, and a medical kit, their faces tense as they took in the scene. Holy, look at him, Sarah breathed, staring at Thunderheart. He's massive. And those injuries. He's guarding wolf pups, Lena said, pointing to the grass. 4 of them, newborn. We need to get them warm and safe, but we can't spook him. Sarah nodded, her eyes sharp with focus. We'll need to sedate him to treat that gash, but let's prioritize the pups. She crept forward, her movements slow and deliberate. Thunderheart's head swung toward her, and he let out a deep, resonant bellow that echoed off the canyon walls. Sarah froze. "Okay, big guy, I'm not here to hurt them," she said softly. Lena stepped closer, her voice steady. "Thunderheart, we're helping them. Let us." She didn't know why she spoke to him as if he could understand, but something in his gaze made her believe he might. To her astonishment, he took a small step back, his eyes locked on hers, as if granting permission. Sarah and Mia worked quickly, wrapping the pups in blankets and placing them in a heated crate. The tiny creatures whimpered, their bodies trembling, but they were alive. Lena watched Thunderheart closely, noting how his ears twitched with each pup's cry, his massive body tense but still. "He's not just protecting them," she said, almost to herself. "He's invested. Like they're his." Mia, securing the crate, glanced up. "That's not normal buffalo behavior, Lena. I mean, I've read about interspecies altruism, but this? It's incredible." "Incredible doesn't cover it," Sarah said, inspecting Thunderheart's wounds from a safe distance. "That gash needs stitches, and those bite marks are infected. He's been fighting hard to keep those pups safe." Lena's eyes drifted back to the trail, the fabric in her bag weighing heavily on her mind. The storm was worsening, lightning flashing closer now, and Thunderheart's condition was deteriorating. His breathing grew more labored, and a faint tremor ran through his legs. They needed to act fast, but the trail's clues, blood, fur, and that scrap of fabric, suggested a larger story. Had humans driven the wolf mother away? Was Thunderheart's act of compassion a response to a human-caused tragedy? As the vet team prepared to sedate Thunderheart, Lena knelt near the pup's crate, her fingers brushing the blanket. One pup let out a soft yip, and Thunderheart's head turned, his eyes softening. Lena's chest ached with a mix of awe and urgency. "We're going to figure this out," she promised, her voice barely audible over the rain. "For you, and for them." But as the tranquilizer dart was loaded, a sharp crack echoed from the canyon, a sound too deliberate to be thunder. Lena's head snapped up, her eyes scanning the darkness. The trail led to more than just clues about the pups, it led to danger, and Thunderheart's sacrifice was only the beginning. The rain lashed down in sheets, turning the Montana prairie into a slick, muddy quagmire. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the massive form of Thunderheart, the buffalo bull, standing resolute over the now empty patch of grass where 4 wolf pups had huddled moments ago. His chestnut coat was soaked, blood and water mingling in rivulets down his flank, where a deep gash throbbed with each labored breath. His dark eyes, glinting with a fierce intelligence, followed Dr. Lena Crowfoot as she crouched near the crate containing the shivering pups, her heart hammering in her chest. The crack that had echoed from the canyon lingered in Lena's mind. Not thunder, but something sharper, like a snapping branch or a gunshot. Her instincts screamed danger, but the immediate crisis demanded her focus. Thunderheart's wounds were severe, and the pups needed shelter. The vet team, Dr. Sarah Klein and Mia, worked swiftly, securing the pups in a heated crate inside their truck. Sarah prepared a tranquilizer dart, her hands steady despite the storm's chaos. "We need to sedate him now," she said, her voice cutting through the wind. "That gash could go septic if we don't act." Lena nodded, but her eyes flicked to the canyon's edge, where the trail of blood, fur, and that mysterious scrap of blue fabric disappeared into the darkness. Thunderheart's protective stance over the pups, his refusal to flee despite his injuries, suggested a deeper story, one that might explain the strange sound. But first, they had to save him and ensure the pup's safety. "Hold off on the dart," Lena said, her voice firm. She stepped closer to Thunderheart, her boots sinking into the mud. The buffalo's head lowered, his curved horns catching the flicker of lightning, and he let out a deep, resonant bellow that vibrated through the ground. It wasn't aggressive, but it carried a weight of warning, as if he sensed the same unease Lena did. "He's not just guarding the pups," she said, half to herself. "He's trusting us to help, but he's still on edge." Sarah raised an eyebrow, the tranquilizer gun poised. "Lena, he's a 2,000-pound wild animal. We can't take chances." "I know," Lena replied, her breath visible in the cold air. "But look at him. He let us take the pups. He's not charging. He's communicating. She met Thunderheart's gaze, and for a moment, the storm seemed to fade. His eyes held a spark. Not fear, not rage, but a plea, as if he understood the stakes. Lena's grandfather's stories echoed in her mind. Tatanka, the buffalo, as a protector of the land, a spirit of resilience. She'd always thought they were metaphors, but now, facing Thunderheart, she felt the truth in them. Mia, huddled near the truck, called out, "Lena, the pups are stable, but we need to get them to the sanctuary. And we need to move him before he collapses." Lena nodded, her mind racing. The sanctuary was an hour away, and the storm was worsening. Thunderheart's legs trembled faintly, his strength waning from blood loss. But the canyon's mystery, the trail, the fabric, the crack, gnawed at her. She couldn't shake the feeling that Thunderheart's act of compassion was tied to a larger threat. "Okay," Lena said, turning to Sarah. "We need to treat his wounds here, but we can't sedate him fully. He might not wake up in this condition. Can you stitch the gash without knocking him out?" Sarah's eyes widened. "That's insane, Lena. He could kill me if I get close." "He won't," Lena said, her voice steady with conviction she barely felt. "I'll keep him calm. He trusts me." She didn't know why she was so certain, but something in Thunderheart's gaze, the way he'd stepped back to let them take the pups, told her he understood her intent. Tom Hargrove, the rancher, stepped forward, his face pale under his hat's brim. "You're betting our lives on that, Lena. I've seen buffalo gore men for less." "I'm not betting," Lena said, her eyes locked on Thunderheart. "I'm trusting him, like he's trusting us." She took a slow step forward, her hands raised, palms open. "Easy, Thunderheart," she murmured, using the name she'd given him. "We're going to help you now." To everyone's astonishment, Thunderheart's ears flicked, and he shifted his weight, lowering his head slightly as if acknowledging her words. His massive shoulders relaxed, just enough to give Lena hope. Sarah exhaled sharply. "Okay, I'll try. But if he moves, I'm out." Lena nodded, her heart pounding as she positioned herself between Thunderheart and Sarah. The veterinarian approached cautiously, medical kit in hand, her eyes darting between the buffalo and the muddy ground. Thunderheart's breathing was heavy, each exhale a puff of mist, but he remained still, his eyes fixed on Lena. She spoke softly, her voice a steady rhythm against the storm's chaos. "You're strong, Thunderheart. You saved those pups. Let us save you." Sarah knelt beside the buffalo's flank, her hands trembling as she cleaned the gash. Blood and mud smeared her gloves, and she winced at the depth of the wound. "This is bad," she muttered. "Coyote bites on his hindquarters, but this gash, it's too clean. Looks like a blade." Lena's stomach twisted. A blade. The scrap of fabric flashed in her mind. Blue, synthetic, torn. Poachers, maybe, or worse. Her eyes darted to the canyon, where another flash of lightning revealed the rocky path. The crack they'd heard could have been a hunter's misstep, or something more deliberate. Sarah worked quickly, threading a needle with practiced precision. Thunderheart flinched as the first stitch went in, his massive body tensing, and Lena's breath caught. She stepped closer, her hand hovering just inches from his shoulder, the coarse, wet fur radiating warmth. "Stay with me," she whispered. To her shock, Thunderheart let out a soft grunt, almost a sigh, and his head dipped lower, as if granting permission. Sarah's hands moved faster, stitching the wound with remarkable speed, while Mia stood ready with the tranquilizer gun, her eyes wide with awe. The wind howled, carrying another faint sound from the canyon, a rustle, like footsteps on gravel. Lena's pulse spiked. "Tom, keep an eye on the trail," she said, her voice low. Tom nodded, gripping his rifle, his gaze scanning the darkness. As Sarah finished the last stitch, Thunderheart let out a deep bellow, not of pain but of something else, relief, perhaps, or acknowledgement. Lena's hand brushed his flank, the contact sending a jolt through her. His fur was rough, warm, alive with the pulse of the prairie itself. "You're incredible," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The pups, now safe in the truck, yipped softly, and Thunderheart's ears twitched, his head turning toward the sound. Lena followed his gaze, her chest tightening. He'd fought off predators, endured pain, and stood guard in a storm to protect those tiny lives. The bond was undeniable, a connection that defied species, rooted in a shared instinct for survival. Sarah packed her kit, her face flushed with adrenaline. He's stable for now, but we need to get him to the sanctuary for antibiotics and rest. That gash'll reopen if he moves too much. Lena nodded, but her eyes returned to the canyon. The trail, the fabric, the blood, they pointed to a human hand in this tragedy. Had poachers killed the pup's mother? Had Thunderheart intervened, only to be wounded himself? And that crack, had someone been watching them? As the team prepared to move Thunderheart, Lena knelt by the crate, checking the pups. Their tiny bodies were warming, their whimpers growing stronger. She glanced at Thunderheart, who watched her with those piercing eyes, and felt a surge of awe. He'd trusted her, worked with her, to save lives not his own. But the mystery of the canyon loomed, and the danger wasn't over. Another rustle came from the rocks, closer now, and Lena's hand tightened on her radio. "Mia, get the sheriff on the line," she said, her voice sharp. "We're not alone out here." The rain had softened to a drizzle, leaving the Montana prairie glistening under a fractured moon. Thunderheart, the massive buffalo bull, stood in a temporary enclosure rigged near the canyon's edge, his chestnut coat still damp but gleaming faintly in the floodlights. The gash on his flank, now stitched and cleaned, was covered with a temporary bandage, but his dark eyes still held a quiet intensity, tracking Dr. Lena Crowfoot as she moved between the enclosure and the vet team's truck. The 4 wolf pups, wrapped in blankets inside a heated crate, yipped softly, their tiny voices a fragile counterpoint to the low rumble of Thunderheart's breathing. Lena's heart still raced from the night's events, the rescue of the pups, Thunderheart's trust, and that unsettling crack from the canyon. The sheriff's deputies were en route, alerted by Mia's urgent call, but the trail of blood, fur, and that torn scrap of blue fabric weighed heavily on Lena's mind. Something human had caused this crisis, and Thunderheart's selfless act was only part of the story. Dr. Sarah Klein, the veterinarian, wiped her hands on a rag, her face etched with exhaustion but lit with awe. "He's stabilizing," she said, glancing at Thunderheart. "That buffalo's a fighter. Most animals would have collapsed by now with those injuries." Lena nodded, her gaze lingering on Thunderheart. His massive frame, nearly 2,000 pounds of muscle and resolve, stood tall despite the ordeal. His coat, matted with mud and blood just hours ago, was beginning to regain its luster under the careful ministrations of the team. When Lena approached the enclosure, he let out a soft grunt, his head dipping as if in recognition. Her chest tightened. "You're more than a fighter," she murmured. "You're a guardian." Mia emerged from the truck, carrying a tablet. "The pups are doing better, heart rates are steady, and they're taking formula. But Lena, we need to get them and Thunderheart to the sanctuary soon. This setup won't hold in another storm." "Agreed," Lena said, her eyes drifting to the canyon. The deputies would investigate the trail, but she couldn't wait. She pulled the plastic bag with the blue fabric from her jacket, turning it over in her gloved hands. The material was synthetic, likely from a jacket, stained with blood and torn as if caught in a struggle. "This is our lead," she said, her voice low. "We need to figure out what happened here." Tom Hargrove, the rancher, joined them, his boots crunching on the wet gravel. "Could be poachers," he said grimly. "Been hearing about illegal wolf hunts in the area. They use traps, sometimes blades. Might explain the gash on your buffalo." Lena's stomach churned. "And the pup's mother?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. Tom shrugged, his face hard. "Could have been caught in a trap, or worse. If she fought back, they'd have killed her to keep her quiet." Lena's fingers tightened around the fabric. Thunderheart's bite marks, likely from jackals or coyotes, suggested he'd intervened in a predator attack, but the clean gash pointed to a human hand. Had he stumbled upon a poaching scene, protecting the pups after their mother was killed? The thought made her blood boil, but it also deepened her awe at his compassion. Headlights cut through the darkness as the sheriff's truck pulled up. Deputy Clara Ruiz stepped out, her face stern under her hat. "Dr. Crowfoot, you said you heard a shot?" she asked, scanning the scene. "Not a shot, exactly," Lena said, describing the sharp crack. "Could have been a branch, but with this," she held up the bagged fabric. "I'm not so sure. We found it near a trail with blood and wolf fur. Thunderheart was guarding 4 wolf pups, and he's got wounds from a fight, plus a blade cut." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Poaching's been a problem out here. Wolves, buffalo, even bears. I'll have my team sweep the canyon at first light." She glanced at Thunderheart, her expression softening. "He really protected those pups?" Lena nodded, her voice steady. "He fought off predators and stood guard in a storm. He's extraordinary." As Clara radioed for backup, Sarah called Lena over to the enclosure. "You need to see this," she said, pointing to Thunderheart's shoulder. Under the floodlights, a faint scar was visible beneath his fur, an old brand, partially healed, shaped like a crescent moon. "This isn't a wild buffalo," Sarah said. "He's from a managed herd, maybe one of the tribal conservation programs." Lena's heart skipped. Her Blackfeet community had been part of a buffalo restoration project, reintroducing genetically pure bison to the prairie. If Thunderheart was one of theirs, his actions carried even deeper significance, a descendant of the sacred Tatanka, protecting life against all odds. She made a mental note to contact the tribal council. The next hours were a blur of action. The team loaded Thunderheart into a reinforced trailer, his massive frame swaying but steady as he stepped inside, guided by Lena's calm voice. "You're safe now," she said, her hand brushing his flank. He snorted softly, his warm breath grazing her arm, and she felt a pang of connection, as if he understood her words. At the sanctuary, a sprawling facility nestled in the foothills, Thunderheart was settled into a padded pen with fresh hay and water. The pups were placed in a climate-controlled nursery, where Mia monitored their progress. Lena watched as Thunderheart lowered himself onto the hay, his eyes half closed but still alert, tracking her movements. When she spoke his name, his ears twitched, and he let out a low, contented rumble. The bond between them was undeniable, a bridge across species forged in trust. By dawn, the storm had cleared, and the sanctuary buzzed with activity. News of Thunderheart's actions spread, drawing a small crowd of researchers and local media. Dr. James Carter, a wildlife behaviorist, arrived from the university, his eyes wide as Lena recounted the story. "This could be groundbreaking," he said, scribbling notes. "Interspecies altruism at this level? If we can study him, it could reshape how we view buffalo cognition." Lena nodded, but her focus was elsewhere. Deputy Clara called with an update. The canyon sweep had uncovered a wolf carcass, female, likely the pup's mother, near a rusted poacher's trap. Tire tracks and a discarded knife sheath suggested human involvement, possibly a group targeting protected species. The blue fabric matched a jacket found nearby, linking it to the scene. "We're running forensics," Clara said. "But this looks like an organized operation." Lena's jaw tightened. The wolf mother had likely fought to protect her pups, only to be killed or driven off. Thunderheart, whether by chance or instinct, had stepped in, facing down jackals and humans alike. His wounds were a testament to his sacrifice, and the pup's survival was his victory. As Lena stood by Thunderheart's pen, watching his steady breathing, she felt a surge of determination. His story wasn't just about survival, it was about compassion, a buffalo defying nature's rules to save lives not his own. The media's interest was growing, and Dr. Carter was already drafting a proposal for a study on buffalo intelligence. Lena saw an opportunity. Thunderheart could be more than a survivor. He could be a symbol, a call to protect the prairie and its creatures. But questions lingered. Who were the poachers? Why had they targeted this wolf pack? And how had Thunderheart, a branded buffalo from a tribal herd, ended up alone in that canyon? As Lena stroked his flank, feeling the warmth of his recovering body, she knew the answers lay ahead, and she'd fight to uncover them, for Thunderheart and the pups he'd saved. The Montana sun dipped low, painting the prairie in hues of gold and crimson as Dr. Lena Crowfoot stood outside Thunderheart's enclosure at the Blackfeet Buffalo Sanctuary. The massive buffalo bull, his chestnut coat now gleaming with renewed vigor, grazed calmly on fresh hay, his stitched gash healing into a faint scar. His dark eyes, once clouded with pain, now sparkled with quiet strength, and when Lena approached, he lifted his head, letting out a soft, resonant grunt that seemed to carry her name. The 4 wolf pups, housed in a nearby nursery, were thriving, their yips echoing through the sanctuary as they tumbled over each other, growing stronger each day. Lena's heart swelled at the sight, but the weight of the past week, the poaching, the danger, and Thunderheart's extraordinary compassion, still pressed on her. The sanctuary, nestled in the rolling foothills near the Little Bighorn River, had become a hub of activity. Thunderheart's story had spread beyond Montana, capturing the attention of wildlife researchers, tribal leaders, and national media. Dr. James Carter, the behaviorist, had launched a study on buffalo cognition, citing Thunderheart's interspecies altruism as a paradigm-shifting case. The Blackfeet Tribal Council, confirming Thunderheart's origin in their conservation herd, declared him a symbol of Tatanka's enduring spirit. Lena, with her deep roots in the Blackfeet community and her expertise as a wildlife biologist, found herself at the center of it all, advocating for Thunderheart's future and the protection of the prairie ecosystem. But the fight wasn't over. The sheriff's investigation had uncovered a poaching ring targeting wolves and buffalo for illegal pelts and trophies. The blue fabric and knife sheath found in the canyon led to a suspect, a local outfitter with a history of illegal hunting. Deputy Clara Ruiz had promised arrests, but the operation was larger than expected, with ties to regional black markets. Lena's discovery of the wolf mother's carcass haunted her. Thunderheart had stepped into a deadly conflict, risking his life to save the pups. His actions had changed everything, not just for the pups, but for Lena herself. She'd come to the prairie seeking data, tracking herds to support the tribal restoration program. But Thunderheart had shifted her perspective. His trust in her, his selfless protection of the pups, had cracked open something inside her, a sense of purpose she'd lost after years of battling bureaucracy and habitat loss. Standing by his enclosure, watching his massive shoulders ripple as he moved, she felt a bond that transcended science. It was personal, a connection forged in the storm and cemented in trust. "Lena," Mia called, jogging over with a clipboard. The council just approved funding for a new buffalo preserve, partly inspired by Thunderheart's story. They want to name it after him, Tatanka Sanctuary. Lena's eyes widened. "That's incredible." She glanced at Thunderheart, who snorted softly, as if approving. "He's already changing things." Mia nodded, her face lit with excitement. "And Carter's study is getting national grants. They're saying Thunderheart could redefine how we protect keystone species. Plus, the media's eating it up. There's talk of a documentary." Lena smiled, but her thoughts drifted to the pups. They were too young to survive in the wild without a pack, so the sanctuary had partnered with a wolf rehabilitation program. The plan was to raise them until they could join a foster pack, but Lena couldn't shake the image of Thunderheart standing guard over them in the rain. "We need to make sure they're safe," she said. "All of them." The day brought new challenges. Bureaucrats from the state wildlife agency arrived, questioning the logistics of keeping Thunderheart at the sanctuary long-term. His genetic lineage, pure, untainted by cattle hybridization, made him valuable, but some argued he should rejoin a wild herd. Lena pushed back, her voice steady but fierce. "He's not just a buffalo," she told the officials during a tense meeting. "He's shown intelligence and compassion beyond what we've documented. He deserves a safe home, and his story can inspire conservation." Dr. Carter backed her up, presenting early data from Thunderheart's behavior. "His actions suggest a level of emotional intelligence we've underestimated in bison," he said, gesturing to video footage of Thunderheart nudging the pups gently. "This could lead to new protections for buffalo herds, maybe even federal policy changes." The officials relented, agreeing to designate the sanctuary as Thunderheart's permanent home, with plans to integrate him into a small, managed herd. Lena felt a surge of relief, but the victory was bittersweet. The poaching ring's reach meant the prairie wasn't safe yet, and she couldn't rest until the threat was gone. That evening, as the sun sank below the horizon, Lena visited Thunderheart's enclosure. The air was thick with the scent of sagebrush and fresh grass, and a soft breeze carried the distant howl of a wolf. perhaps a reminder of the pup's lost mother. Thunderheart stood at the fence, his massive head lowered as Lena approached. She reached out, her fingers brushing his coarse fur, and he leaned into her touch, a gentle nudge that sent warmth through her. "You changed me, you know," she whispered, her voice thick. "I was just a scientist before you. Now, I'm fighting for you." Thunderheart's eyes met hers, steady and knowing, and he let out a low bellow that echoed across the sanctuary. Lena's throat tightened. She thought of her grandfather's stories, of Tatanka as a bridge between the land and its people. Thunderheart was that bridge, his compassion a call to action for everyone who heard his story. The pups, now named Storm, Ember, Sage, and Dawn, were thriving in the nursery. Lena visited them daily, marveling at their growth. One afternoon, she brought their crate to Thunderheart's enclosure, setting it near the fence. The pups yipped excitedly, and Thunderheart's ears twitched, his head lowering to sniff the air. He let out a soft grunt, almost a greeting, and the pups responded with eager squeaks. Lena's heart swelled. "You're still their guardian," she said, smiling. The broader impact was unfolding. The Blackfeet Tribal Council launched a campaign to protect wild herds, using Thunderheart's story to rally support. Schools across Montana invited Lena to speak, and children sent drawings of a mighty buffalo shielding tiny wolves. The media frenzy grew, with articles calling Thunderheart the guardian of the prairie. Lena worked with Carter to draft a proposal for a federal conservation grant, aiming to expand protected lands and crack down on poaching. But for Lena, the transformation was personal. She'd spent years burying her grief over lost habitats, her grandfather's passing, her own doubts about making a difference. Thunderheart had rekindled her fire. As she stood by his enclosure, watching him graze under a starlit sky, she felt a clarity she hadn't known in years. She was no longer just a biologist, she was a protector, like Thunderheart, fighting for a world where compassion could thrive. The sanctuary's gates opened to visitors the next day, and a small crowd gathered to see Thunderheart. A young girl, clutching a sketch of a buffalo, approached Lena. "Is he really a hero?" she asked. Lena knelt, smiling. "He is. He saved 4 little wolves, even when it hurt him. He's teaching us all how to care." As the girl ran off, Lena glanced at Thunderheart, his silhouette majestic against the dawn. The fight against poaching continued, and the pup's future was uncertain, but for now, Thunderheart was home, his legacy growing. Lena knew the next steps. Policy changes, public awareness, a safe haven for the pups, would shape the prairie's future. And she was ready to lead, inspired by the buffalo who'd shown her the power of trust. The prairie stretched boundless under a late summer sky, its golden grasses swaying in a gentle breeze that carried the faint scent of sagebrush and earth. At the heart of the newly christened Tatanka sanctuary, Thunderheart, the massive buffalo bull, stood tall, his chestnut coat gleaming in the sunlight. His wounds had healed into faint scars, a testament to his resilience, and his dark eyes sparkled with a quiet wisdom that seemed to hold the stories of the land itself. Dr. Lena Crowfoot stood at the edge of his enclosure, her hand resting on the wooden fence, watching as he grazed peacefully alongside a small herd of buffalo, their hooves drumming softly against the earth. In the distance, the 4 wolf pups, Storm, Ember, Sage, and Dawn, tumbled playfully in a nearby pen, their yips echoing like a promise of life renewed. It had been 3 months since that stormy night in the canyon, when Lena first found Thunderheart guarding the orphaned pups against jackals and human threats. His act of compassion had rippled far beyond the Montana prairie, reshaping lives, policies, and perceptions. The Tatanka Sanctuary, funded by the Blackfeet Tribal Council and national grants, now sprawled across 10,000 acres, a haven for buffalo and wolves alike. Thunderheart, named Tatanka Wakan, sacred buffalo, by the tribe, had become its heart, a living symbol of resilience and interspecies connection. Lena's boots crunched on the dry grass as she walked toward Thunderheart's enclosure, her braids swinging gently. The air was warm, thick with the hum of crickets and the distant bellow of a buffalo calf. She carried a small carved wooden plaque, a gift from the tribal elders, inscribed with Thunderheart's name and a Blackfeet prayer for the land. As she hung it on the fence, Thunderheart lifted his head, his massive shoulders rippling, and let out a low, resonant bellow that seemed to vibrate through the earth. Lena smiled, her fingers brushing the plaque. "You did this," she whispered. "You brought us together." The sanctuary wasn't just a refuge, it was a movement. Thunderheart's story had sparked a national conversation about wildlife conservation. Dr. James Carter's study on buffalo cognition, inspired by Thunderheart's protection of the wolf pups, had led to a groundbreaking paper published in a major journal. It argued that buffalo possessed emotional intelligence comparable to elephants or dolphins, prompting calls for stronger federal protections for wild herds. The Blackfeet Tribal Council, with Lena's advocacy, had secured funding for anti-poaching patrols, and the sheriff's investigation had dismantled the poaching ring, leading to multiple arrests. The blue fabric and knife sheath had tied the outfitter to the wolf mother's death, closing a painful chapter but opening a new one for conservation. The wolf pups, now sturdy and playful, were preparing for release into a foster pack in Yellowstone. Lena visited them daily, marveling at their growth. Storm, the boldest, would nip at her fingers, while Sage, the quiet one, watched her with eyes that mirrored Thunderheart's, knowing, almost soulful. Their survival was Thunderheart's legacy, a testament to a buffalo who defied nature's rules to save lives not his own. Lena's own transformation was profound. She'd come to the prairie as a scientist, driven by data and duty, but Thunderheart had awakened something deeper, a connection to her Blackfeet heritage, to the stories her grandfather told of Tatanka as a guardian of the land. She'd once felt powerless against habitat loss and bureaucracy, but now she stood as a leader, speaking at schools, tribal gatherings, and even a congressional hearing on wildlife policy. Thunderheart had taught her that compassion could move mountains, and she carried that lesson into every fight for the prairie. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting a warm glow over the sanctuary, Lena walked to Thunderheart's enclosure for a final moment. The crowd of visitors, families, researchers, and tribal members, had dispersed, leaving the prairie quiet. Thunderheart approached the fence, his massive head lowering until his warm breath grazed her hand. She reached out, her fingers sinking into his coarse fur, feeling the pulse of life beneath. "You showed me what matters," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Trust, love, sacrifice, you carried it all." Thunderheart's eyes met hers, steady and deep, and he nudged her hand gently, a gesture that felt like a promise. Lena's throat tightened. She thought of the pups, the sanctuary, the policies changing because of one buffalo's courage. His legacy was etched in the land, in the children who drew his image, in the researchers who studied his kind with new respect. But for Lena, it was personal, a bond that had reshaped her soul. She stepped back, watching Thunderheart turn and gallop across the enclosure, his hooves thundering against the earth, his silhouette majestic against the sunset. The other buffalo joined him, their bellows echoing like a song of the prairie. Lena's heart swelled with wonder, with hope, with a call to action that burned brighter than ever. To you, reading this, Thunderheart's story is more than a tale of one buffalo and 4 wolf pups. It's a reminder that compassion crosses boundaries, between species, between hearts, between the past and the future. Have you ever witnessed an animal's act of kindness that changed you? Have you seen the wild and felt its call? The prairie is alive, and it needs us, our voices, our hands, our love. Support conservation, share Thunderheart's story, protect the lands that hold these sacred connections. Ask yourself, what can you do to honor the resilience of the wild, to ensure that creatures like Thunderheart and the pups he saved thrive for generations? The answer lies in you, in the choices you make, in the stories you carry forward.